The Constellation Coliseum rose from the Texas plains like a monument to two kinds of grit. Built from steel and concrete but laced with bronze panels etched with the names of fallen heroes, the arena stood as a place where modern warriors met the memory of those who came before. Its arches were high and proud, catching the morning sun, and its banners snapped in the wind like the flags that once flew over distant battlefields. It was opening night. A full crowd had gathered from every corner of the state, packing the circular stands, with a mix of veterans in old uniforms, young fight fans in fresh merch, and families with kids clutching little flags. The buzz wasn't loud, though. It was heavy. The kind of quiet where you could feel the weight of what this night meant to so many people. They called it the legacy match. Not just a fight. Not just a show. A bridge between generations. Between warriors who had fought for their country and those now fighting for glory, strength, and respect. It wasn't about winning. It was about remembering and honoring what it costs to make it to this point. Inside the arena, the floor had been transformed into a perfect circle of sand-colored mat, bordered by dark navy trim. Above it hung a giant ring of lights, shaped like a military insignia shining down like a spotlight on history. Screens played slow-motion clips of past wars, military funerals, championship knockouts, and family reunions, all cut together in a way that made even the toughest men quiet their breath. In one corner, a group of active-duty soldiers stood at attention. In the other, the state's top MMA fighters warmed up, their hands taped and their eyes locked forward. The contrast was sharp but not tense. It was respectful, like two parts of the same story standing side by side. From the private tunnel entrance, Commander Peter Callahan stepped into the light. He didn't rush. He didn't need to. The crowd saw him, and that was enough. The wave of applause started slowly from the veterans first, then rippled outward until it became a full swell of sound that wrapped around the arena like a rising tide. Callahan was in his late 60s now, but his frame still held the shape of command. Broad shoulders, a square jaw, the kind of posture that didn't sag with age. He wore dark athletic gear with the Navy SEAL trident stitched over his heart. His silver hair was cropped short, and his eyes scanned the arena not with nerves, but with something deeper, a quiet knowing. He had served 32 years, 4 tours overseas, 2 Bronze Stars, 1 shattered leg, and countless nights spent wondering if his men would all make it home. He wasn't here to show off. He was here to stand for the ones who couldn't. As he walked toward the center, the announcer kept silent. No need for theatrics. This part wasn't about hype. It was about memory. The kind of moment where you could almost hear the stories behind each pair of hands clapping in the crowd. Stories of fathers, uncles, brothers, and friends who once wore the uniform and never came back. In the front row sat a group of older men, all in their 70s and 80s. Some with canes, some are in wheelchairs, but all sitting up straight, eyes locked on Callahan, like they were watching one of their own take the field one last time. And in a way they were. A young boy next to one of them leaned in and whispered something. The old man smiled, tapped the boy's chest with 2 fingers, and said quietly enough for the camera to miss it, but loud enough for the moment to land. That's what a man looks like when he stands for something bigger than himself. The lights dimmed slightly as Callahan reached the center. A Marine Corps honor guard marched out and unfurled a massive American flag, their steps in perfect rhythm. A single bugler played a slow, clear note from the edge of the stands. The silence that followed was thick, not empty. A space where memory lived. Tonight, Callahan would not fight an enemy. He would stand in a ring across from a younger man, an MMA star rising fast through the ranks. The match would be controlled. No knockouts, no blood sport, just the echo of skill meeting discipline. Power meeting principle. Youth facing legacy. Behind the scenes, some questioned the point. What does an old commander have to do with combat sports? But those in the know understood. This wasn't just entertainment. This was a reminder that every arena, every cage, every moment of combat, no matter how modern, has its roots in sacrifice. As Callahan stretched his shoulders and took a deep breath, a hush settled over the crowd. The screens above faded into black. The lights focused on him alone. His presence didn't demand attention. It invited it. With humility, with honor. In the locker rooms, the younger fighters grew quiet. Some had heard of Callahan. A few had fathers who served under him. Others just knew his name from a wall, a medal, or a story told around dinner tables on Sunday nights. The legacy match was about to begin. But in truth, the real battle had already started. Not between fists, but between memory and ambition. Between tradition and ego. Between the past that built the present and the present trying to outrun its shadow. And in the middle of it all stood one man, not looking for glory, just standing steady and proud for something that still matters. The music hit like a shockwave. Heavy bass electric guitar and a voiceover screaming his name filled the arena with a jolt of raw energy. Spotlights spun wild, slicing through the dimmed house lights in flashes of red and silver. From the tunnel emerged Logan Mercer, shirtless, ripped and grinning like he owned the place. He walked with a swagger that made cameras race to catch every angle. His nickname lit up behind him in neon fire on the big screens, the Wolf. He wore a custom black and gray robe draped loose over his shoulders, the back stitched with a snarling wolf baring its teeth. His fight shorts shimmered like chrome under the lights branded with sponsors and slogans, none of which hinted at honor. A pair of oversized aviators hid his eyes, but his smirk did all the talking. He stopped halfway down the ramp, looked around, then lifted his arms like he was soaking in the crowd's energy. Some cheered. Most didn't. A few veterans in the front rows crossed their arms and didn't bother to clap. Logan turned toward them and tapped 2 fingers to his forehead in a half salute. The gesture was sloppy, showy, and almost taunting. He held it too long, smiled too widely, then turned away before any of them could react. As the music thumped louder, 2 crew members brought out a steel cage prop shaped like a broken-down bunker door. Logan punched through it with a practiced move that set off a burst of smoke and lights. His fans roared. The rest watched with a tight silence. He jogged the final stretch to the ring, pointing at the cameras, mouthing something about being the future, then climbed up the steps 2 at a time. Once inside, he didn't head straight to his corner. He took a slow circle, soaking in the lights, turning his back to Callahan without a glance. A mic was handed to him. He didn't wait for permission. He raised it to his lips and spoke over the fading music. He talked about legacy being just another word for holding people back. Said strength wasn't earned through medals, but through dominance. Power wasn't something you inherited. It was something you took. There were a few laughs in the crowd, mostly from younger fans, who followed his online streams and fight clips, but the veterans in the stands stayed stone-faced. One man in uniform shook his head slowly, lips pressed tight. Logan grinned wider as if feeding off the tension. He called this match a send-off party for the old guard. Said it was time to stop worshiping ghosts. Time to move forward. Time to let wolves run the pack. In the opposite corner, Callahan stood still, arms folded across his chest. He didn't react. Not a flinch. Just watched. Quietly. The way a man does when he's seen this kind of noise before and knows it always burns out in the end. Logan turned to him and finally made eye contact. His smile dropped into a sneer. He said something too low for the mic to catch, but close enough for Callahan to hear. The cameras caught it, though. Lip readers would have no trouble later. Something about old bones and past glory. Then, Logan threw his arms up again, pacing like a predator, jaw clenched tight. He was young, strong, hungry, but too loud for the room, too sharp for the moment. Every step he took seemed to stomp on the stillness that had filled the arena minutes earlier. The announcer stepped in to officially introduce the match. As names were read, Logan made faces behind the speaker's back. He mimed yawning, pretended to polish a medal on his chest, winked at the cameras as if none of this was serious to him. When the national anthem began, Logan stood still, but his stance wasn't respectful. His arms were crossed, his head tilted back slightly like he was enduring something old and tired. He didn't mouth the words, didn't remove his gloves, just waited. The song ended. The lights brightened. The crowd exhaled. Logan bounced on his heels full of energy. His eyes flicked toward Callahan again, this time with something colder behind the grin. Not fear, not respect, just a challenge. There was no handshake, no nod, no moment of shared acknowledgement, just a stare between two men who stood for different things. One for glory, one for legacy. As the ref stepped in to explain the rules, Logan barely listened. He rolled his shoulders, shadow-boxed, glanced up at the screens replaying Callahan's old combat footage, then turned away like it meant nothing. For the older crowd, the shift in mood was clear. What had begun as a tribute to history was now sliding into something uncomfortable. The kind of spectacle that made your jaw tighten, made your chest feel heavy, like something sacred had been brought out only to be mocked. Logan didn't care. He was already the headline in his own mind, already planning the victory clip, the sound bites, the trending hashtags. He didn't see the men in the front row who had once stormed beaches and dragged wounded brothers to safety. He saw an audience, one that would watch him win, one who would remember his name. The bell hadn't rung yet, but the tension was building fast. Not the usual fight night hype. This was different, sharper, more personal, like something bigger was at stake. And in that moment, as Logan raised his fists and cracked his neck, the difference between a warrior and a performer had never felt clearer. The arena lights dimmed again, and for a long second, everything held still. No music, no announcement, just silence, thick and full like the moment before a flag is folded. Then the spotlight found him. Commander Peter Callahan stepped into the ring with no fanfare, no walkout song, just the slow tap of his boots on canvas. He moved with purpose, his pace steady, shoulders square, his face unreadable. Every veteran in the crowd rose to their feet without needing to be asked. He wore no robe, no flashy colors, just a simple dark training top and fight trunks with a stitched navy insignia near the hem. The scars on his arms told stories his mouth never had to. His eyes never left Logan. The younger man bounced in place, grinning and pointing at Callahan like he was a prop in a bad joke. But the crowd wasn't laughing. The weight of the moment was pushed down hard now, as if everyone could feel this wasn't just a fight. The bell rang. For a few moments, neither moved. Callahan kept his hands up, eyes locked and legs firm. Logan circled him, smirking, feinting, talking under his breath. Then he struck. A sharp leg kick. Callahan took it, stepped back, and recentered. Then another. Then two jabs that caught his guard. The crowd tensed, but the old commander stayed calm, reading, adjusting. He wasn't fast, but he was sharp. When Logan threw a wide hook, Callahan slipped it and countered with a short right to the ribs. It landed clean. The veterans in the stands let out a breath they didn't know they'd been holding. But Logan laughed. He turned to the crowd, shrugged-mouthed something about weak hands, and threw a spinning elbow that grazed Callahan's temple. It didn't drop him, but it rocked him. Still, Callahan didn't panic. He reset, breathed deep, and pressed forward again. He wasn't there to win. He was there to stand, to show that dignity still had a place in this cage. But Logan didn't care. He came in harder now. A flurry of strikes, a takedown attempt. He shoved Callahan to the mat and raised his arms like it was over. The ref didn't stop it. Callahan pushed himself up slow but steady. Blood trickled from above his eyebrow. His chest heaved. He blinked sweat from his eyes and stepped back in. That moment should have meant something. A man refusing to quit. A warrior standing tall not for pride, but for principle. But Logan didn't see it. He faked low came high with a head kick, and this time it landed. Callahan dropped. The sound echoed like a dropped microphone. Clean. Sudden. Final. The crowd froze. The ref stepped in, waving it off. The medical crew rushed in. But Logan wasn't finished. He climbed the cage wall, stood on top like a gladiator, arms spread wide. He howled again like he had won a title, then jumped down, grabbed the mic from the ringside, and walked back to where Callahan lay. The medics were helping him sit up, wiping blood from his face, steadying his shoulders. He was awake. Hurt. Dazed. But still trying to rise on his own. Logan leaned over him close enough for the mic to catch every word. That's your legacy. A broken old man who couldn't last one round. Thanks for your service, Grandpa. But this is my arena now. The words hit harder than any punch. The veterans in the front row stood again, but this time their faces were tight with anger. A woman near the aisle covered her mouth. One man turned and walked out. Nobody clapped. The arena went quiet. Not the stunned kind of quiet after a great knockout. This was different, uncomfortable, wrong. Even Logan's fans didn't cheer, not right away. A few tried to laugh, but the moment didn't hold. The spotlight stayed on Callahan, still kneeling, eyes low, hands braced on the mat, like a man trying to hold on to something slipping away. The ref said nothing. The announcer didn't speak. The music didn't play. And for the first time that night, even the lights seemed unsure where to shine. He had been there the whole time. Front row, right behind the press barrier legs, still hands resting quietly on his knees, watching like he had all the time in the world. Chuck Norris didn't shift in his seat when Logan made his entrance. He didn't flinch when Callahan went down. He just watched, steady and still, as if nothing surprised him anymore. He wore a simple black jacket collar, zipped up a cap pulled low over his brow. No security detail, no spotlight, just a presence. One thing the crowd hadn't noticed at first, but couldn't look away from once they did. The camera found him for less than 2 seconds. It didn't need more. A ripple moved through the audience like wind across tall grass. Soft but certain. People sat up straighter, whispered names to each other. Is that? No one said it out loud, but everyone felt it. A shift in the air. The way things change when someone walks into a room carrying more than their name. He didn't nod, didn't smile. His expression was unreadable. Calm. Like a man who had seen the storm before and knew better than to chase lightning. Beside him, a young boy tugged on his grandfather's sleeve and pointed. The older man leaned close, said something only the boy could hear, then gave Chuck a long look of respect. Chuck didn't look back. He just kept watching the ring. Inside the cage, Logan was still pacing arms wide, soaking up whatever reaction he could get. He saw the crowd looking somewhere else now. It bothered him even if he didn't show it. He followed their gaze. Saw the man in the front row. It took him a second. Then it clicked. He squinted, smirked, tilted his head and raised a hand toward Chuck like he was tipping an invisible hat. Well, look who finally woke up. We got the wax statue of Texas legends watching the show now. A few nervous chuckles scattered through the crowd, but they didn't stick. The energy had changed, like a line had been crossed that nobody wanted him to notice yet. Chuck didn't blink, didn't speak. His eyes stayed on the cage. His body never moved. Logan laughed once, short and sharp, then turned his back and raised his fists again, calling for a microphone. But the camera didn't follow him this time. It lingered on Chuck just long enough to show that stillness can speak louder than anything. The fight was over, but something else had started, and everyone in that arena knew it, even if only one man had felt it first. Logan stood in the center of the ring chest, heaving arms open like he was daring the world to blink. His voice cracked through the speakers sharp and loud, dragging everyone's attention back. He pointed at the veterans in the crowd and asked if they still thought honor meant anything in a world run by winners. He circled slowly, working the audience, feeding off the tension that still hung in the air. Every word he spoke came heavier, nastier, like he knew he was crossing lines now and didn't care. He leaned into the edge. Then he looked straight at the front row. What about you, old man? You're gonna just sit there and blink at me, or are you ready to admit your time's up? For a moment, nothing happened. The silence that followed was thicker than anything before it. No chants. No music, just stillness. Chuck Norris didn't flinch. He didn't shift in his seat or glance around. He just kept his eyes on Logan like he was reading a storm long before it touched the ground. Then quietly he stood. No sudden movement, no drama. He rose like the wind standing up off a flat plain. His breath was steady. His frame is solid. Not fast, not loud, just final. The crowd didn't cheer. They held their breath. Cameras swung to him but didn't zoom too close, as if getting too near would break the moment. Chuck looked at the ring without emotion, just the quiet clarity of a man who'd seen real fights and didn't mistake noise for courage. He stood still for a long second, then stepped forward just once, just enough for the lights to catch his full face. He spoke only when he was ready. "This isn't about you, son." 5 words, low, measured, but their weight hit like a bell tolling in a quiet church. The sound carried without force. It didn't need volume. It had gravity. People didn't react at first. They just let the words land. One man in the upper rows closed his eyes. A woman near the back whispered them to herself like they meant something she hadn't known she'd needed to hear. Even Logan froze for half a beat. His grin slipped, then came back thinner this time. "Oh, it is now." He pointed to the mat voice rising again. "If you've got something to prove, cowboy, come prove it right here." Chuck didn't move. He didn't speak again. He just kept standing, watching. The crowd stayed hushed, waiting, holding on to the quiet, like it mattered more than any punch that had been thrown that night. And for the first time, Logan didn't look so loud. Chuck Norris didn't rush. He stepped around the barrier and walked toward the ring with the same steady rhythm he'd kept all night. No music followed him. No lights danced. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. He moved like a man who didn't need to prove where he'd been. Every step was measured, not slow, but thoughtful, like he understood the weight of each one and respected it. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't shout. They watched. Quietly. Some stood. Most didn't know why they had only that something about this felt too important to meet with noise. Chuck reached the steps and paused, one hand resting on the rail. He looked at the mat without blinking, as if measuring it. Then he climbed in. No flash. No gesture. Just presence. Inside the ring, Logan kept moving. He bounced on his heels, threw lazy shadow punches into the air, and called out jokes toward the camera crew. His voice echoed louder now, as if he was trying to fill the space Chuck had left silent. Chuck walked to the center. Stopped. He removed his jacket, slowly folded it once, and handed it to the official. Underneath, he wore a plain black shirt tucked into dark training pants. No logos. No names, just fabric and bone. He took his position in the corner without looking at Logan. He rolled one shoulder back, exhaled once through his nose, then lifted his hands into a stance that was simple quiet and unmistakably real. It was the kind of stance that didn't need adjusting, not stiff, not flashy, just grounded. Like something carved into him long ago that never went away. Logan clapped loudly, mocking him. He shouted something about old movies and slow reflexes. The sound bounced around the arena, but nobody laughed. Chuck didn't move. He didn't answer. His breathing was even. His feet are light. His eyes were steady. The referee stepped in, ran through the rules again out of habit more than need. He glanced at Chuck once. Chuck gave a slow nod. Nothing more. Logan grinned widely, teeth-flashing arms spread in mock welcome. "You ready for this legend?" Chuck didn't flinch. Logan scoffed and turned to face his corner, shaking his arms out like it was any other match. But there was something different now. A shift that wasn't in the light or sound, but in the way the crowd leaned forward quietly waiting. The timekeeper raised the bell hammer. 2 men stood ready, one full of fire, one full of stillness. And in the space between them, the weight of something older than both began to rise. The bell rang, and Logan moved fast. He came in like a storm, fists flashing, feet barely touching the mat. Hooks, kicks, feints, all in quick rhythm. Chuck didn't raise his hands. He didn't strike. He shifted. Just enough. A slip of the shoulder, a step to the side, a dip of the head that left Logan's glove slicing air. The crowd leaned in but stayed quiet. Something about the silence made each movement feel louder. Logan's breath, his grunts, the soft slap of his feet on canvas. All of it started to sound sharp against the calm. He pressed harder. A spinning back kick, a flurry of punches up top, a sudden drive to the body. But none of it landed. Chuck wasn't running. He wasn't retreating. He was just not there when the hit arrived. It was like watching a man step around falling rain. Logan's face started to tighten. His grin faded into focus, then into something close to frustration. He shouted again, threw a knee, missed again. Chuck's eyes never blinked. He didn't breathe heavily. He just kept his center and balance always calm and always a half beat ahead. One moment, Logan's right cross snapped out, the kind that ended fights early. But Chuck turned slightly, and it passed so close you'd think it grazed him. It didn't. It never had a chance. The audience still hadn't made a sound. Phones were out, but no one was shouting. They were watching something they didn't quite understand yet. It wasn't showy. It wasn't violent. It was clean, controlled, patient. Logan backed up just for a second, then exploded forward again. Another flurry, another rush. His hands were moving faster than most people could follow, but Chuck still didn't hit him. He just moved where Logan wasn't. Each dodge looked simple, but anyone who had ever fought could tell. This wasn't reflex. This was reading, timing. A man who knew where the chaos would land before it even started. Logan spun again, overcommitted. Chuck leaned, pivoted, and let him pass. He could have countered. He didn't. And that choice said everything. Logan was younger, stronger, faster. But Chuck wasn't here to chase a finish. He was here to show the truth. That real power doesn't shout. It listens. That real skill doesn't prove. It reveals. By the end of the round, Logan was breathing harder. His skin glistened. His jaw clenched. His eyes searched for something that wasn't standing across from him. Chuck stood still. His hands and shoulders relaxed like he hadn't even warmed up yet. The bell rang. Neither moved right away. Then Chuck turned, walked slowly back to his corner, and sat on the stool without a word. The crowd exhaled as if they'd forgotten how, then fell quiet again. What they were watching wasn't a fight. It was a lesson. Logan's steps slowed. His breathing, once sharp and proud, now came heavy and unsure. He circled again, but his feet dragged just enough for the crowd to notice. Chuck hadn't touched him. Not really. But the weight of missing of chasing had begun to pull at Logan's frame. He blinked fast, trying to reset, trying to find the rhythm that used to come so easily. Chuck didn't move much. Just enough. A small shift of weight, a readjustment of distance. His hands were still low, still open. Logan feinted a jab, then stepped in with speed. It should have worked. But Chuck didn't retreat. He stepped forward just half a step and lifted his right hand. Not a punch. A palm. Open. Quiet. It met Logan's sternum right as he planted his lead foot. Not with force. With timing. The sound was soft. No crack. No snap. Just the light thud of skin on skin like a door closing gently. But Logan stumbled. His body rocked back, his balance gone before he even understood why. He caught himself, barely his arms flailing out to stop the fall. He stood again. But he didn't advance. The arena went still. No cheers, no gasps, just silence. Thick, dense, like the whole room knew they had seen something rare. Chuck didn't follow. He didn't press. He dropped his hand and stood with the same quiet stance as before. Not proud, not aggressive, just present. Logan looked at him, jaw-tight eyes narrowing. But his feet didn't move. His body, for the first time, didn't respond with fire. Chuck's silence said more than any taunt could have. He wasn't here to win. He wasn't here to hurt. This wasn't a contest. It was a mirror. The crowd stayed seated, but not out of boredom. In reverence. In something like disbelief. It was as if they were watching a man show the difference between knowing how to fight and knowing why. Logan took another breath, then another. His chest still lifted, but not with pride, with doubt. Chuck said nothing, and in that silence, Logan began to understand. Logan's face twisted as he stepped back, breathing hard, fists clenched at his sides. The silence around him only made it worse. He shook his head like he was trying to clear it, then shouted something sharp that didn't carry far. He pointed at Chuck and yelled again, louder this time. "Come on, fight me!" He pounded his chest and charged, throwing punches in fast bursts, looking for anything that would land. Chuck didn't flinch. He turned, shifted, let the strikes slide past him like water against stone. His feet never stopped moving, small and quiet, never wasting a step. Logan kept pressing. Hooks, knees, elbows. The crowd watched in silence. The rhythm of the moment broken only by Logan's breath and the scuff of shoes on canvas. Chuck blocked one strike with a forearm and guided the next wide with an open hand. Still no hits thrown back. Just redirection. Like a current redirecting a falling branch. Then Logan roared and leapt into a flying knee, desperate for a moment of control. Chuck pivoted, placed one hand gently on Logan's hip, and let him pass. Logan hit the ropes hard. He stumbled, caught himself, turned wild-eyed. Sweat poured down his face. His shoulders shook with rage. He screamed again. "Fight me like a man!" Chuck stood in the center. His breath was calm. Hands are still low. He looked at Logan and spoke without raising his voice. Fighting isn't about being louder. It's about knowing when not to. The words settled into the air like dust after a storm. No music, no reaction. Just the quiet truth of them. Logan didn't charge again. Not right away. He stood there, chest rising, eyes darting, unsure for the first time if he understood the rules of this ring anymore. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't clap. They just watched. Not because it was exciting. because something was shifting. A man had come to win. But now he wasn't sure what that even meant. Logan's legs gave out before he even noticed. One moment he was standing. Next, he was sitting on the mat, arms resting on his knees, chest rising slowly and unevenly. The fight was over, but no bell had rung. He looked down at his hands like they didn't belong to him. His gloves, once clenched with purpose, now hung limp at his sides. He wasn't angry anymore. The fire had gone out, and what was left felt strange, hollow, quiet. He looked up at Chuck, not with defiance, not with a challenge, just confusion. "Why didn't you finish me?" His voice cracked in the air, soft, almost boyish. It wasn't a question for a fighter. It was a question from someone who no longer knew what part he was playing. Chuck stepped closer but didn't crouch or lean in. He kept his distance not out of pride but out of respect. His voice stayed even. "Because you're not the enemy. Your ego is." The words didn't sting. They settled. Logan blinked. His head dropped. One hand came up to his face, almost like instinct, as if he could stop what was coming before it showed. But the tear slipped out anyway. It traced a slow line down his cheek, cutting through sweat, landing on the canvas like something heavier than water. He didn't speak again. He didn't need to. Chuck stayed where he was, silent, still. The camera didn't pan away. It held the frame. A broken moment that didn't look like failure. It looked like something deeper, honest, human. In the crowd, no one cheered. Some looked down. Others just watched, still and quiet, like they understood this was something rare. Logan let his arms fall to his sides. His shoulders dropped. He exhaled slowly, the sound of surrender without shame. There was nothing left to fight. Not in the ring, not in himself. And that somehow was the beginning. Logan stayed on the mat for a while, hands resting open beside him, eyes fixed on the floor, like he was still catching up to the silence inside himself. Chuck had already stepped back. No celebration. No claim. The ref never raised a hand. There was no winner tonight. Not by score. Not by knockout. After a long breath, Logan reached down and unlaced his gloves. He peeled them off one at a time, slowly and deliberately. Then he stood. His walk wasn't proud, but it was steady. No music played. No lights shifted. Just the soft creak of the mat under his feet. He didn't look at Chuck. Not yet. He didn't look at the crowd. His eyes locked onto the front row where Commander Peter Callahan still sat. Callahan hadn't moved much since the fight ended. His face was unreadable. Not cold, not warm. Just present. Watching. Logan stepped to the edge of the ring closest to him. He paused. Then I climbed through the ropes and dropped to the floor. The noise in the arena faded to something close to reverence. No cheers. Just stillness. Like the room itself was holding a breath it hadn't realized it took. Logan stood in front of the man he had once mocked. The man he had knocked down. The man who had risen anyway. He brought his heels together, straightened his back, and raised his hand to his brow. It was clean, full, no shortcuts, a textbook military salute, the kind they teach in silence, the kind that means everything when words are too small. Callahan returned it without hesitation. No one spoke. No one needed to. The crowd rose. one row at a time, quietly, slowly, not for applause, but because sitting didn't feel right anymore. Some had tears in their eyes. Others just stood with hands over hearts, not out of habit, but out of something deeper. Logan dropped his salute. He gave a small nod, then turned and walked back to the center of the ring. Chuck was still there, still calm, still watching. Logan didn't bow, didn't shake his hand. He just stood beside him for a moment, then stepped back. This wasn't about the show anymore. It was about what a man chooses after the noise ends. And tonight, he chose to change. Chuck didn't raise his arms. He didn't wave to the crowd or look for a camera. He turned from the center of the ring the same way he had entered it, quietly, with purpose. His steps were calm, unhurried, steady as breath. The lights didn't follow him. They stayed fixed on the mat behind him, where something had shifted that words could never explain. He paused once at the corner. There, resting on the top rope, was a folded black towel, neatly placed, small, clean. He set it down with care, smoothing the fabric just once. On the edge, stitched in thread, barely brighter than the cloth itself, were 5 words. Legacy is lived, not shouted. He didn't point to it, didn't wait for someone to notice. He just walked through the ropes and stepped down onto the floor. A few heads turned. A few phones were lifted. But no one called his name. No one asked for anything. They just watched. He passed the first row, gave a quiet nod to Callahan, then kept walking. The camera stayed on the ring. Logan was no longer there. The cage was empty. Still, the mat was untouched except for faint prints and the towel in the corner. No music played. No announcements followed. Just silence. A silence that didn't feel empty. It felt full, like something had ended the right way. Quiet, grounded, without needing to be explained. And in that stillness, a truth lingered longer than any roar ever could. In the weeks after the fight, offers poured in. Sponsorship deals, talk show interviews, streaming contracts. All wanting the same thing: his story, his brand, his face next to headlines about redemption. Logan turned them all down, not out of bitterness, not out of pride, but because the noise didn't matter anymore. He moved out of his high-rise apartment and stopped filming training clips. The daily posts, the curated workouts, the shout-outs, they just faded. He didn't make an announcement. He just let the noise go quiet. A year passed. In a small warehouse on the edge of town, tucked between an old auto shop and a shuttered grocery store, a new sign went up. It didn't glow. It didn't scream. It just said, Mercer Academy. Inside, the mats were worn early, and the walls were clean but plain. There was no championship wall, no trophy case, just a row of folded GIs, a handful of heavy bags, and a quiet corner where a folded black towel rested behind glass. Logan taught 6 days a week. He didn't talk much. He didn't bark orders. He moved through the room with quiet eyes and steady breath. The kids who came through the door weren't looking to fight in cages. They were looking for something else. Some didn't even know what it was yet. Some were angry. Some were scared. A few didn't speak at all. Logan didn't fix them. He trained with them. He taught them how to move, how to breathe. How can you slow down when everything inside wants to rush? Some picked it up fast. Others took months. He never yelled, never showed off. When one of them sparred too hard, he stepped in not with punishment, but with a look that made them understand. He taught presence, not by explaining it, but by being it. Sometimes after class, a few kids stayed behind to ask questions. Most wanted stories. They asked if it was true he once knocked out 3 guys in under a minute. He'd smile, shake his head, and say that wasn't the story worth remembering. One afternoon near the end of a quiet Wednesday class, a boy around 12 lingered by the towel in the glass case. He looked at the stitching, read the words out loud. Legacy is lived, not shouted. He turned to Logan. What does that mean? Logan didn't answer right away. He sat down on the mat and motioned for the boy to join him. They sat together, legs crossed in the same corner where Logan used to spar harder than he needed to. He looked at the towel, then at the boy, and said slowly from someplace deep inside him, "It means you don't prove who you are by being louder. You prove it by what you leave behind when the lights are off." The boy nodded, not fully understanding, but something in him settled. Logan didn't say more. He didn't need to. They sat a moment longer, just breathing, just being. And in that stillness, a new kind of legacy was already beginning. The gym was quiet, just the soft thump of feet on the mat and the low shuffle of breath. The kids were wrapping up drills, sweat on their foreheads, focused but calm. Logan moved among them, adjusting a stance here, a grip there, his presence quiet but steady. In the far corner, 2 boys practiced a slow takedown, more balance than power. One of them looked up and pointed to a faint movement Logan had shown earlier, the way he had redirected an arm with just a shift of weight. He asked who taught him that. Not with excitement, just curiosity. Logan paused. He looked at the mat, then at the framed towel on the wall. It wasn't a move. It was a moment. The boy nodded, not needing more. He went back to the drill hands, lighter now, more thoughtful. Logan stood by the edge of the mat and watched the last of the kids pair off again. The noise was gone. Just quiet effort. Just stillness filled with purpose. The lights were soft. The gym smelled like sweat and old wood. No music played. No mirrors lined the walls. Just the space, the breath, and the weight of lessons left behind. Logan walked to the frame one last time before locking up for the night. The towel was just as it had been, black folded clean. The words were stitched across the edge. Legacy is lived, not shouted. He stood there for a moment, not remembering, just feeling. The room behind him stayed quiet. The lights clicked off one by one, and the lesson remained right where it needed to be.